Hello, welcome to this podcast thingy, Take on Ukraine. I'm Yurii, here's Serhii. Uh, yeah, Serhii is a Western kind of man. I'm Aboriginal Ukraine, never been anywhere, anywhere aside from Ukraine. So
I'm the
hopefully
one on the other continent, trying to hear what people say about Ukraine, how to think about it. I meet leftists, right-wingers, Russian speakers, Russians, and I'll try to deliver these questions to our podcast so Yura and I can think about these questions, meditate on these questions, and think how a Ukrainian should respond to certain challenges that we now have in this post-colonial situation, because we used to be colonial and we had to pretend to be something else, to be someone in a different area. But now we, I think, feel more cosmopolitan or maybe rooted in our culture. So we need to figure out how to talk about it. Am I right? Is this our goal?
Yeah, this is pretty much how it should go, I think. Yeah, because we are basically Ukraine explaining things to Western people.
Yeah, so we're doing the reverse of West-plaining or Rus-plaining of Ukrainian culture, and we are showing you how it works when we Ukrainize you, Ukraine-splain you. I wanted to start with the question that concerns a lot of people in the US and also in the world: what to do with the Russian culture, how to think about canceling it, about its language. It's a question that the people who speak the language also ask themselves: should they teach their children the Russian language? And if they should, how should they do it? This is the question I actually heard from one of my friends. And I wanted to start with one simple example and also my experience, because both I and Yura studied in Kiev, and Russian literature was one of these tools to colonize us, even in post-Soviet environment. We were colonized in different ways because we have age difference, but there are some patterns that still continue in Ukraine despite independence and all the possibilities that the government could have taken. The problem is that a lot of Ukrainians, especially of older generations, really believe that it's impossible to imagine world culture without Russian literature, especially of the 19th century. The century when the Russian Empire grew to power, was the most powerful in its history, and proposed its names of Pushkin, Lermontov, Turgenev, and at the end, Tolstoy, and other, of course, names. And the question is how they were selected, why these people, what did they write so incredible and special that we continue to lean on them, and why American universities teach them so eagerly, while a lot of universities actually don't get enrollment in these courses, but they continue to be taught instead of Serbian or Bosnian or Macedonian or other cultures.
You mean in the West, right?
In the West, yes. It's like the thing that is everywhere. It's not only in Ukraine, but also in the US, and it's what unites us. Maybe Americans are not colonized by this culture, but they are put in the position of imperialistic thinking. So if you respond to an empire, you respond with an imperialistic vision. That's what Chomsky constantly does with talking about Ukraine. He never really encounters Ukraine for what it is. He's like, but now let's talk about American empire and then Russian empire. What about Ukraine? It's a liberal democracy. Let's talk about American liberal democracy, and then the discussion will be very different. It will be about how we elect people and so forth, or how we expand our culture. We need to expand our culture, but it should be cultural expansion. We need to sell interesting ideas, books, but not the idea that, you know, Russian is superior to anybody else or American is superior just by birth. Because these are chauvinistic ideas, and if we circulate them, they can survive, but we don't want them to survive because there are a lot of people, billions of people, who will suffer because of that. So I want to start with literature, and sorry for my long pitch.
It's okay. I'll have something to cut out of this to make it short.
Yes, perfect. So I want to start with Pushkin. And please make me a host so I can start with showing you how Pushkin is taught in the US.
Yep. Yep.
So that's where I want to start talking about canceling Russian culture and what it means. Definitely it's not about canceling Russians or canceling the Russian language. It's just understanding what it means today and what it's going to mean if we don't change anything about it. I want to stop comparing it to Nazi regime or German language after the Second World War. It's different. It's different because it has been developing since the World War II and because it has more prevalence. And if you go to a New York bookstore, you'll see lots of Russian authors without any explicit disclaimer who they are. They're already a discounted product. People buy them, they read, let's say, Trotsky, Lenin, they don't understand the context, and that's the problem. So one example is Pushkin. He's very well sold everywhere in the US as well. And let's look at this map. These are the streets named by after Pushkin in Ukraine and Germany. And if you look at this map of Germany, you see that there is no coincidence that this part has the streets of Pushkin. Why? Because this was a Russian territory, Soviet kind of territory, but we understand that this was captured in the Second World War and taken by the Russians to control it and to homogenize it with the Soviet Union. And this is the symbol of colonization. If you go out on the street and it's named by Pushkin, even without knowing who Pushkin is, it's in the back of your mind. And then when you encounter something Russian, you're like, okay, but this is a great culture because we have a street by Pushkin, or after Pushkin and after other people, and probably they mean something to us. And this is where we need to start: decolonization and de-Russification, and also canceling Russian culture, understanding that it's imported, that it's not our choice to name the street after Pushkin, but it is a political decision made 50 years ago because of the war. And this is like we are the third generation after this war. We are absolutely disconnected from the context, and it has different impact on our lives. And with this, I want to switch actually to the email that I sent you, where we'll look at how Americans are taught Russian culture. It's exactly the same way as the Germans or the Ukrainians are taught it in the world.
Okay.
So this is the example that unites all of us who are the subjects of colonization by the Russian Empire, Pushkin. And maybe that's still an intrigue for you, why I concentrate so much on a poet, a writer, such an important person for Russian culture. Maybe I just hate Russian culture. That's why Pushkin needs to be deconstructed. If you learn anything about him from a non-Russian perspective, you'll understand that he was against regular people, peasants, and their uprisings. He was against any decolonization by the Poles, Ukrainians, other Asian nations. He was an aristocrat, and his whole purpose was to militarize Caucasus during his lifetime. And he did like really disturbing things. He invented myth about Ukrainian Cossack Mazepa, that he was sleeping with his niece just to prove that Ukrainians are bad. There were lots of things that you can discuss about Pushkin, but I want to discuss only the rhetoric around him. And it's up to you to figure out what's wrong with him. So this is a presentation of Pushkin at an American university. There is no critical stance at all. There are Americans and Russians discussing him as a researcher, someone knowing a lot about history and trying to figure out the right narrative about what happened in the past. Well, I'll tell you, he invented a lot of his history. There is no reason to come up as a historian to say it was right what he said, because it wasn't. it was a mystification, and that's exactly how we speak usually about romantic literature, as a mystification of the author and his content. So, you know, he is discussed as this prophet of history. It's a wrong perspective. And let's get from this American perspective to Russian perspective in Ukraine right now. This is the next slide. Look at this. This is a billboard installed in Kherson, now occupied by Russians. You know, every Ukrainian can have now a Russian passport, although this passport will have no value. You cannot get a visa with this passport, you cannot travel with this, but this is a way to claim citizenship, to take away actually Ukrainian citizenship. And this is the symbol of this transformation of a Ukrainian into Russian. So the Russians installed a billboard with a quotation from Pushkin telling that he traveled from Crimea, from Simferopol, to Chisinau, of course, because Moldova is the next target of Russian occupation. They already claimed that, and Pridnestrovia, Transnistria, is kind of the you know, the end goal of Novorossiya, New Russia. So they want to have a corridor from Crimea to Moldova, and Pushkin is the symbol to unite these territories absolutely superficially, because he has a quotation from that time where he says that, look, my relative, my ancestor used to be here in Kherson, I was in Odessa, I was in Simferopol and Chisinau. You know, imagine yourself being anywhere in the world saying, look, this is my territory because I once went, let's say, to Mexico, you know, to spend my American dollars. So it's American territory. It's bullshit. It's pure imperialism and chauvinism, and you can never tolerate it. And that's why we think about canceling Pushkin as a great author. We know a lot about him, about his imperialist agenda. We know how he's used rhetorically by Russians in the US and in Ukraine. So we tell you that, okay, you may think that it's great literature, but ask yourself, why? Why? Why not somebody else from the same era?
I also, yeah, like the very like inside Ukraine perspective on this. First is it's like Pushkin being famous is like a reverse of what a person should do to become famous. So he is famous not because of his literature, like a normal person way is you write something amazing, people read it, it becomes a bestseller or something, then maybe you make some contribution to your culture, your country's culture in general, and then a street is named after you. Maybe you became a political person, someone who contributed to political life of your people, and then the street is named after you. But with Pushkin and yeah, pretty much any Russian writer on previously Russian occupied territory, it's the reverse. You're famous not because you wrote something, but because the street is named after you. So naming a street comes first, then you become famous. Like any historical figure might become famous overnight because you named the street after that person, and you installed billboards all over the city explaining how great he was, how he laid his foot on this, he laid his holy foot on this ground, and it will be mandatory to you to know who this person is. When I grew up in my very Soviet Khushchevka neighborhood, pretty much every street was named after some kind of a Soviet general or Soviet politician, if I can call Soviet politicians, because you know, like my street was where I grew up, Bluchera. It's literally named after the general who failed miserably in World War II. yeah, he like this person basically did what Russians are doing now in Ukraine. He threw a lot of people at the objective, and yeah, he achieved his objective eventually. But you name a street, you start a memorial board at the start of the street after a person who killed maybe like 100,000 of your men. You erect a memorial for the one of the most inefficient people in the world just because he achieved his objective eventually. Yeah, and the second thing I can remember about Russian literature in Ukrainian context is the school. So the person who will be teaching you any literature, especially Ukrainian literature, was raised in the Soviet Union. And maybe they know something about Ukrainian literature, maybe if they were interested in that period, but basically neither your teacher or your parents will know how important how important a book or an essay is to Ukrainian culture. So and they and like teachers tend to express this knee-jerk reaction every time, like you sit in a class, it's a Ukrainian literature class, and it will be like Taras Shevchenko, some poem of him, and and and, and the teacher will give you this look like, no, this is garbage. Go learn Pushkin or something great because this is poor man's stuff. You should not read this, and just because your parents may or yeah like maybe they grew up in the Soviet influence, maybe they don't, maybe they were dissidents, but more often than not, your parents are typical Soviet people. So when you bring it up with them, that what am I reading and why is this important, they don't know shit. And they will have this automatic reaction like this is Ukrainian, this must be garbage. And so I think entire generation of people maybe confused on Ukrainian literature or like Ukrainian culture in general, just in a way we were taught Ukrainian culture in schools, like this primary education.
Can I jump in here?
Yeah.
This is what a Ukrainian language and literature scholar needs to learn right now, not to be Soviet. Because the template of teaching Ukrainian literature and culture is exactly the same as with all minor literatures in the Soviet Union. It's ideological. It's based on the idea that institution decides what is valuable, and these institutions are ministries, school as such, university. The problem is that it's taught not based on student perspective, not student-centered. And I was taught that this is meaningful because it represents some part of history, a class, or anything like this. And I disagreed with this all my life. And I think that I was right, because once I crossed the border with Ukraine and went to the West, to America, everything was absolutely different. The perspective is we live in the ocean of different texts. I really like a graffiti that I saw in Mexico, a man trying to raise up, but the letters are falling on him. So he looks like he is overwhelmed by all the literature and languages that fall on our shoulders. And I think this is the most realistic feeling that someone living in free spirit can have, being overwhelmed by information. And it's the opposite of what I see with my colleagues who graduated from a program in the Soviet and post-Soviet countries, that they have a strong idea of what is canon, what are the important texts to be taught, and that, you know, everybody needs to read this. That's how we connect to each other. It's a mistake.
Can I show this funny thing for a moment? This is a tweet of RIA Novosti, a state-controlled media in Russia. So after Russians finally captured Mariupol, they went looting as usual, basically, and they recorded this video of foreign literature textbook at the school. And so Russians are shocked that we learn Russian literature as a foreign literature, that we consider it something foreign, not ours. So, and yeah, so they continue this. Like it's important. I think it's very important for us to stress this enough that it's not like this colonial politics, this colonial narrative. It's not the thing of the past. We are still experiencing it. We're still yeah, we experienced it daily. We experienced it not only like in cities that Russian claim like widely considered like Russian speaking, like Donetsk or Kharkiv or Odessa. We experienced it in Lviv. So as far west as you can go, you can experience Russian colonialism still to this day in the same template. You can go to Germany and like Germans will attack you, not Russians living in Germany. Germans will attack you about why are you not considering yourself Russian? What's wrong with Russian? You know, this is a very far-reaching thing.
Yeah, and that's what's changing in all Slavic countries. I met a worker in Poland who was very well educated for just being a worker, but he told me that when in the 80s he went to Italy to work as a constructor, everybody told him, "You are Russian, Ruski." But he's like, "No, I'm from Poland. I'm from Śląsk. You know, I grew up there. I was surrounded by Germans, not by Russians." But nobody get it. Nobody get it. In the 80s, he was just Ruski. And today, who would call a Pole Ruski? That would be offensive. And this is where we are going with all this decolonization, is that at some point, Ruski will live in Moscow and maybe some parts of St. Petersburg, and people will discover that Russia is very big, really. It's not about territory, it's about diversity. And if we want to learn Russian culture, we should start with Yakutia, Buryatia, Tatarstan, and you know, maybe also colonized Asian states of Kyrgyzstan, which also had lots of cultural important stuff, or Kazakhstan, huge, interesting culture that also speaks a little bit of Russian. Now it's changing, but they're not Ruskis.
Yeah,
because
also,
they speak Russian.
Yeah, also, there is this music meme in like in music enthusiast sphere. It's like when you're asked what music do you like, and you can't explain it because you're too big brained for this kind of thing, you answer like Mongolian throat singing. And yeah, every time I try to explain this joke to people, I type into YouTube Mongolian throat singing, and what do you know? There are a bunch of fucking Russians trying to sing it. There are like overwhelming majority of results you get in YouTube are Russians doing Mongolian throat singing, because and it's really because they are so big. They touch this big part of like north of Mongolia, I think. Yeah, is it north? Yeah,
yes,
north of Mongolia, and this is the same, basically the same. Like no, I can't call them the same cultures, but yeah, it's peoples of Mongolia who are now considered to be Russian for some reason. You look at the map, you point a finger at the territory of Russia, and you assume that Russians will live there, but no.
The thing is, I really was shocked by a video proposed from YouTube, which was literally called "Why Russians Did Not Colonize Mongolia," but actually they colonized it. It's a mistake to think they didn't. The main streets are called by Russian generals, poets, and I had the privilege to study with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mongolia at Columbia in a class about Ukraine. And he said that they constantly had to balance between China and Russia, and they still depend a lot on Russia in terms of foreign policies because of their economy, it's weak, and also because of their colonial history. They were colonized during the Soviet times. So it's a particular type of project where everything is narrow to communism, socialism, class ideology. And yeah, Mongolia is colonized by Russia, and it's colonized culturally too, because as you said, you cannot experience throat stinging from the Mongolians because there are lots of Russians who try to appropriate and then say, look, this is our cultural space. And that's why I don't like when Russians insist on including Ukrainian products, even Russian-speaking products, into their project. When they show Kira Muratova, a famous director, within their canon of film studies. I think it's wrong.
Oh, yeah,
she's Ukrainian.
Yes, about appropriating stuff. I think I wrote an entire thread on Twitter about this movie, Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors, which is shot by Georgian director in the 60s. So Georgian director shooting a Ukrainian classic. Basically, yeah, the Shadow of Forgotten Ancestors is it's a Ukrainian literature classic about
Kotyubinsky, by Kotyubinsky.
By Kotyubinsky. It's really a celebration of Carpathian culture, basically. The book, both the book and the movie, so it's filled with this very, very distinctly Ukrainian things. And yeah, so what about it? So when it premiered in movie theater named Ukraina, there were a bunch of Ukrainian dissidents who voiced their concerns about ongoing repressions.
Russification. That's what they called in the 70s.
Yes. Yeah. Basically
in the 60s, yeah.
In the 60s and in the 70s and ongoing. But there was yet another round of repression against Ukrainian young elites, basically. And yes, the whole thing was basically dispersed by police. So about the director, many famous Ukrainian people were arrested. Some on that exact date, some a little later. But the director of this film, Parjanov, he's a Georgian. He was also arrested. Many of these people, many people who were involved in producing this movie, were dissidents, and the Soviet regime jailed them many times. Parajanov, I think, served three sentences before dying. And if you Google Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors or Тени забытых предков, the first thing you will find is some fucking Russian YouTube channel broadcasting it as Russian classic. And yeah, and this was done a lot, really. Like, first you jail somebody, then you declare his work. Oh yeah, yeah, his work was great, after all. So after your death, after 3 jail sentences, we pardon you. And now we consider this a great imperial classic that shows that shows a rich culture of our uh, of people we conquered. Yes, I can't fit it in my head basically how hypocritical it is.
Absolutely, and that's where we always return with this idea that institution, actually colonial institution, does this the same way. It dictates how we should read a text, and it says for the first time, it says, look, this is anti-colonial, so it has to be shaped, cut down. And once it's shaped properly, when all these associations with Ukrainian independent culture are erased, suddenly we say, look, but this is us. This is what should it be. And this is very tricky because it happens even today with the with different directors, and it's a constant juggling. So, but the thing is that identity for an imperial culture is constructed. They always try to change it a little bit. If you like a position, like if you want to say that Шестидесятники, all these like people who opposed Russification are Russians, it's easy to do. I see it all the time in the US. It's just enough to say that they didn't like the way it was done, but they actually supported the empire itself. So, just map it this way, and Americans will buy into this. And I see how Americans actually changed their identity since the war started. It's a funny way because it's still kind of resting on imperial colonial discourses and rhetoric. But at the same time, it includes these resistance moments. So how to speak about resistance against imperialism? You equalize it with resistance inside the imperial culture. So Pushkin also was punished 3 times. He was sent to Odessa as Mickiewicz, or other people who were Taras Shevchenko. They were punished during the same time of mid-19th century for their views, but these views are very different, and their trajectory changed differently. So with Shevchenko, he stopped writing because he was banned from writing. He had the secret diary. With Mickiewicz, he had to, become silent for some time. With Pushkin, no, he just became more paternalistic, more colonial, and in this way he got promoted. So this punishment is the way to narrow the writer in a particular direction. And if you cannot do this, just put the writer in jail for several terms. And this is how you shape the discourse. And
yeah. So basically, when Pushkin was banished from St. Petersburg, I think, basically he was not really like punished, or maybe it was considered a punishment, but what he basically became is a propaganda chief on Caucasus. So he accompanied Russian military on their conquest of Caucasus, where he wrote poems about how great this region is, and how our military is great, and how our empire is great, and all of that. So basically, he became chief, like somebody. He became something like current day Russian propagandists that visit Mariupol, that visit occupied territories, and they shoot videos. They shoot like this propaganda disguised as news. So that was exactly the function of Pushkin back then.
And also for a Russian subject, it's narrated as he made a mistake, an institution of Tsar corrected it, and Pushkin kind of went to the right path, and that's why he's great now, because he corrected himself. You know, you need to change yourself to become great. And with Shevchenko, it worked the opposite way, right? Because he has poem Caucasus, which is considered to be pro-nationalistic by Chechens, Dagestans. I know that this is a famous poem for them because I met like also Georgians who spoke about it. Like we know this poem. This is like our brother. You are our brothers because you had great poets who wrote something like this. And Shevchenko went the other path, right? He said that, no, I'm not gonna submit to these correction facilities and become a propagandist. And this is how the institution creates difference. One more thing to add about this correction is Dostoevsky, right? Because he was very fluent in his early youth, although he also was from kind of rich background, and then he got arrested, and then he went through almost execution. The Tsar himself said that, okay, we will not execute these people because they were actually soft cells, you know, we are not afraid of them. And suddenly Dostoevsky becomes the propagandist of the state, because he thinks that they saved his life, although they were about to take it. And this is where it works. Even being punished can be read in different ways, as a way to be against the power, but also as a way to be narrowed by the power, to become great, to be shaped by this power. And this is how we should think about ourselves right now. And I'm talking not about Ukrainians, but everybody who's connected to Russia, or everybody who lives outside of Russia, because any institution is like a radio tower. It sends you pings, it sends you signals, which are actually questions. And there was a famous French intellectual, French leader of Communist Party, Althusser, who invented a great term, heiling. So ideology heils you. As Nazi were heiling each other with this heil. So Russian culture is
immediately banned on YouTube for that.
You'll have to cut me. Yeah. So probably just you know, put a
I'll
symbol
believe
like,
you.
Yeah. B. You know. So B. But the idea is that you can also say heiling Pushkin, and you say, okay, yeah, Pushkin is great. You already created this link. And when we are talking about canceling Russian culture, we basically mean that we need to not respond to this message. You know, they're telling you Pushkin, read Pushkin, and you say, but you know, I'm busy with reading everything that was written in the last 20 years or maybe 50 years. I'm busy with Kyrgyz literature, but not with, you know, repetition of 19th or 18th century authors who are just colonizers, and they're important for you because they connect you and us. So I don't want to read this anymore. I want to connect with Caucasians. I want to be the friends with Georgians, not with Moscow.
And how we can tell that our attempts at decolonizing are working, are effective, is that Russians, like the Ministry of Culture or Ministry of Propaganda, complains constantly about our attempts. They call it cancel culture. So they think that decolonizing like the narrative about Ukraine and banning like Russian citizens basically from entering some states or from participating in other cultures are equal to shadow banning you on Twitter. And and they showed this cringe video where where they portray Ukrainians as clowns. Yeah. What's that supposed to mean? That just like judging. Yeah, so this is a court. Actually, here is Mykola Gogol, he's a Ukrainian. So already there they claim that a Ukrainian is a great Russian author who is about to get cancelled by a bunch of clowns in Vishivankas and red sharvari. So somebody thought this will be a good idea to shoot this video, to promote it as Russian mission UNESCO. So they think their culture is endangered, like UNESCO thing. So they seek protection of international institutions just because Ukrainians don't want to perceive themselves as Russian anymore. And I think they use this exact wording, canceling culture and cancel culture, like Putin and Medvedev, they are constantly talking about cancel culture as the plague of the West. I think it's a dog whistle. I say, this is a dog whistle for some like Republican types who are also claiming cancel culture is there.
That's really great that you brought this up, even this concept of cancel culture. And I should tell you that I met a lot of already Americans who tell me that it's really wrong to call decolonization a cancel culture because these are different things. But there is something similar happening right now in the US. We cannot say that, let's say, topping a monument is a unique situation for Ukraine right now because we are fighting with Russian influence. I should say that toppling happens in Poland. They also took away a lot of tanks, Russian tanks, that symbolized the Soviet victory in the Second World War, but we know also what they symbolize. They symbolize, like, you know, these tanks will come and hit you if you want to do something on your own. Like we don't use force because you submit, but once you don't submit, we'll do what we did in Czechoslovakia in 1968, or in let's say like in Poland in 1954, I guess, also in 56 Budapest and other countries. And, you know, like maybe Hungary is so willing to cooperate with Russia because of this history, and the main monument in the center is to the Soviet soldier. Because the soldier.
You mean in Budapest, right?
In Budapest, yes. Wow. It was really striking to see it after all I learned. And I went to Budapest to study at Central European University, funded by Soros, which is gone because of Orban, and Orban is anti-Semitic and fights against Soros because he knows that Soros is capitalism, is cosmopolitanism, while he wants to be really connected with Russia. So
also this thing with Orban and Soros, it was really praised in alt-right media. It was really praised. It was praised as a great victory of European high culture over degenerate LGBTQ stuff. So are we not gonna claim they have ties with Russia now, or
yeah, so Russia wants to show that it's an alternative to Western project, to gender politics, to sexual revolution of the 60s, for a second. And they are very playful with how they use liberal discourses, because Ukraine is described as anti-liberal project. Also, and here I need to add that this is how whataboutism actually works. All whataboutism, and Chomsky represents it really well in American culture. It's like, why not Syria? Why not Afghanistan? Why do we talk about Ukraine? Because a less developed country attacked a more developed country in terms of political freedom. Russia, a totalitarian state, attacked a liberal democracy, and it wants to destroy the expansion of democracy in the world, fighting with expression of oneself, like sexual liberty or political free speech. This is the problem. But at the same time, Russians want to appeal to Western conservative discourse, and that's why they vilify things like woke culture and cancel culture. And I already saw here where regular people sell merchandise with Ukraine and woke culture together, because that's what liberals think about Ukraine. And I think that there's like a really playful thing that Russians really want Ukraine to fit into this narrative that everything that is bad with liberalism is Ukraine. And the people who support liberalism actually also start thinking this way. And it becomes so mixed up that for us, it will be really hard to explain it in our terms until we invent them, until Ukrainians start producing their own narratives on what is happening. But I want to, for a second, to defend the difference between woke culture and cancel culture. Ukraine is very diverse for that. We also have conservatives, especially religious conservatives, people who really want to build a Ukrainian Orthodox church without Moscovian KGB input, people who want to develop their traditions, which are not united, homogenized as it is in Russia. We have Carpathian culture, we have Crimean Tatars, we have Southern culture, Slobozhanщина around Kharkiv, also Policia in North. So it's very different, and we really want to see this happening. And it's outside of, unfortunately, it's outside of American context. It's very different. It's more like Switzerland, but even more diverse because of the suppression that happened before, and people just really need new identities to happen, you know, to be performed. And I guess that the only place where woke culture has a dot with Ukrainian culture is this idea that we need to express ourselves. But the only difference, I think the main difference, is what is expressed. For Ukrainians, it's still the idea of local nationhood. While in America, obviously, it's about individualized culture. They're just different. I don't know what is better or good. I think they're just, we just need to separate it.
Yeah, like yes, I hear this a lot, that America is a melting pot of the world. So there are like, it's not a homogeneous culture in America. So I think this is like left woke thing is trying to destigmatize their own cultural expressions on American land, whereas we are trying to destigmatize expressing ourselves as ourselves on our own land. That's the primary difference for me, because and not only we need to like not feel guilty expressing ourselves, performing ourselves as Ukrainians, we also need to find out finally what does it really mean, because it was suppressed for so long, and we started to forget. Yeah, like the Ukrainian language itself was changed by Soviets to make it closer to Russian.
That's absolutely true. By dictionaries, by changing who is teaching it, and what Russians do now, by changing manuals, books, textbooks at school and at university.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't really remember my point anymore, but
yeah, you said that we still need to discover what to be Ukrainian is, because it was suppressed, shaped, and we were humiliated for doing this. I also, like in my lifetime, I remember this, that speaking Ukrainian at the Ukrainian school was a problem, because lots of children were like, yeah, you know, it's not that cool, and let's speak Russian because it's going to be, you know, more urban.
Yeah, also like in schools or in university, like in education field, where you spend your like first, I don't know, like 20 years of your life, maybe, like you spend in this like collective environment, and if you're trying to learn something technical, something STEM like I was, uh, you can't really count on something like math being taught to you in Ukrainian. Like it's not gonna happen. Like period. Uh, like everybody, yeah. So in higher education here, it's mandatory to teach in Ukrainian, but because like, you have these Ukrainian textbooks, you have some older Soviet ones, but they are like considered obsolete by many, and it's mandated that you teach in Ukrainian. But then this rule is not this rule is not followed. You will get all sorts of remarks. Like I remember on electronics class, I had electronics class in university. Like we are supposed to learn how to connect things and how they interact, like capacitors, resistors, and stuff. And entire like 2 academic hours without a break, the professor were basically ranting about how she's not allowed to teach in Russian anymore. So time well spent, I guess. Like I for 1.5 hours listening to basically grandma complaining about not being allowed to teach in Russian anymore. And yeah, and this was because she was asked specifically, can you please continue in Ukrainian? Because we need to, yeah, like uh, we need to know Ukrainian terms. You are not the only teacher around. Like we're gonna go later to other professors in our lifetime, and we will be required to pass an exam in Ukrainian. So it's really a practical thing for us. Please teach us in Ukrainian, and yeah, a rant. Uh,
Can I jump in here
yeah,
about
yeah, yeah.
Resilience that the Russian speakers show in education, especially because lots of them actually were transported to teach at Ukrainian universities as well as in other republics. And there was the policy in the Soviet Union, you didn't decide where you go. You graduate and then they tell you where to go to work, even if it's a small village. And that was the worst thing, the worst case scenario for people. Even education was like drafting in the army. You do what you're told to do, and there is a grand narrative of how it should be done. So these people stayed, and they were continuing to teaching how they were told to teach, and they're not motivated to change, obviously, because the whole point was to change everybody else. Their position is they're progressors. You know, they teach STEM. You will become a professional in your field if you learn it, and they shouldn't learn anything else. They're probably teaching still based on the manuals that they used 20, 30 years ago. So it's like conservation bubble, and they teach you to be conservative. But why? There is certain mythology around the Russian language that I hear everywhere, and it's what shapes colonial subjects to believe that this is how it should be done, that Russian should be superior to other languages. The main myth is that Russian is an international language, unlike Ukrainian or Kazakh or anything else, and that's why everybody should speak it. And so, yeah, you're not learning Ukrainian terms, but you're learning Russian terms, and you can use it in post-Soviet environment. And you know, post-Soviet environment has more money than Ukraine, so let's concentrate on more profitable things, right? Oh, I see you.
A raid.
Yeah. Should you move around?
Yeah. I probably should. I'll pause the recording. So.
Okay. So my speech was interrupted by Russian missiles. I'll sum up the first point. The idea that Russians sell the mythology of their language as being international. So it's as important as English. So, you know, between Ukrainian and Russian and English, you can choose Russian, and it's going to be a really valuable choice, which proved to be wrong. especially now when Russia is descending into really terrible economic situation. And how can you trade with this, right? Especially if you are a Ukrainian. But there are other grounds to this myth that are implanted in human thinking to make people first respond to this B from Russian ideology, and second, to respond with a proper choice of Russian instead of anything else in the ocean of possibilities. So the Russian language, besides being an international one, is also the one that you inherit, like with your body. There are lots of memes about the woman who once said in Crimea that she has a Russian jaw, so she cannot speak any other language. You know, she's built the proper way to speak Russian. And usually there is another thing that comes with this is I think in the Russian language, so I cannot switch to anything else. And this mythology is easy to deconstruct, but also I always thought about this is like, why? Does this mean that the Russian language makes you kind of dumber because you cannot switch to anything else? Like, you know, your body gets shaped and then your mind is completely devastated by all of these flexes of etymology in the Russian language, so you cannot learn anything else. You know, you're so busy with like thinking in Russian that nothing else can fit in there. Well, now I know that it's bullshit. Actually, you can speak lots of languages, and I know lots of educated Russians. The problem is that once they learn another language, they stop being imperialist Russians.
I think I know where this stems from. Because when you're speaking Russian, you always must think of what you are saying. Because, like, your neighbor, your kid might snitch on you. So you're busy thinking in Russian, and you think any other language is like that too. That like if you speak Ukrainian, if you speak English, you must always you must always think about how it will be interpreted. Can you be sent to gulag for what you said in English? Like you don't understand English enough, you can't speak well enough or understand cultural things around English, so you will be sent to gulag, to English gulag for speaking things that are not meant to be spoken. Maybe it's like that.
The thing is, actually, Russian subjects enjoy violating so-called political correctness in other cultures, using banned terms or provoking with their ideas, exactly because they don't have to be afraid of someone snitching on them, and also because they know that they represent their culture in a foreign language. So they still can, you know, they're building their identity around these points. But that's exactly where I'm leading with my point. So I said about these homogenizing features of the Russian identity, when you say it's bigger than anything else, you know, it's enough to know only this to be a like perfect subject in world affairs. And it leads to this idea of blindness, of pan-Slavism, when you say that, you know, Russians can be the core of Slavic tribes. They epitomize everything that exists in all Slavic tribes. And that's, you know, it's enough to know Russian to understand Old Church Slavonic and everything that grew out of this. It's like a historical perspective on difference, where difference is erased, actually. And what you show here on the screen kind of illustrates this, that you have Ukrainian and English, but also it can be replaced by a Russian sign, and it will kind of represent Cyrillic, Slavic perspective that embraces Ukrainian, but also pushes away foreign Western impact. And this similarity is represented in how Pan-Slavism is pushed in the world. Actually was funded by the Russians, by the Russian Empire in the 18th century, and then it led into Romanticism, where Russian and Slavic was equalizing, and still in the West and in the US mostly, Slavic studies means Russian studies, and all these Slavic tribes in conversation with Russian imperialism, but also obviously thinking about nationalism inside these Slavic regions as destructive, as anti-progressive, because everything that is Russian is progressive.
Yeah,
should we ask? Yeah, why so?
And I also wanted to show one really good illustration about this point. Like, it's only enough to learn Russian for Russians specifically. Because here is this channel, Bolton Bancroft. Yeah, he basically travels post-Soviet world, and yeah, so I think everyone is pretty much familiar of how traveling by plane in US looks like. Like, you even like low cost things, you go to airport, you board like a pretty modern plane. Maybe sometimes it's not modern, but yeah, like imagine this same thing, but within the Soviet Union. So what can you expect from it? Here is An-2, An-2,
a Ukrainian plane.
A Ukrainian plane in, I think it's Tajikistan or something like that. So yeah, everybody speaks Russian because Russian was forced on them. It's the first thing. But then, can you look at the conditions of this plane? It's also really noisy, and they still travel like that. This is a very recent video. And like traveling like in post-Soviet space by plane within your country or within like post-Soviet space cannot look like that. I think I think this is like a pretty common sight somewhere in Siberia or something, where you will board this 1950s. I think it's 1950s plane. I think P might be 60s version. So basically, you're flying in 1960s plane, which looks like a marshrutka, which looks like you're somewhere in Africa. Also, pilot, you can see right here, pilots are using a smartphone with Waze or Google Maps or what is it to navigate. So if you want to live like that, Russian is enough. Russian is enough. If you think this is acceptable, if you think this is a acceptable way of living in a modern world, and you don't need anything else, and you're good to go. Russian is your friend.
That's a good perspective. Yes, the thing is, the Russian. So one of my friends asked me a tremendously good question. Again, right? How should we understand the Russian language? And I started with this question, and I think this is the question of the whole episode. Is this the culture of imperialism? Can it be seen outside of Russia, and will it make it different? You narrowed it down that this is, let's say, a cultural, conceptual sphere. It's also technology. It's the way you approach things. It's the way to be comfortable in the things how they are. So you can change yourself, but you cannot change the reality. And so you embrace the Soviet legacy. And for a Westerner, it may be even better, right? You read Cyrillic, you learn the Russian language, and wow, this is so comfortable. You can travel 1/6 of the world without bothering. But this is a constructed reality, I should tell you. And also it's reductionist, because once you focus out of the Russian perspective on things and the Russian language, you discover, that aside of it, there are lots of identities. And I even have a colleague at Columbia University who wrote a book about Ukraine without knowing the Ukrainian language. And I should tell you, that was a very dark book. It's about like drug addicts, people, you know, outside of, actually outsiders, outcasts. So this is like a really imperialist perspective reproduced by a Westerner who is probably genuinely interested in Ukraine, but she cannot access what's happening in Ukraine because she thinks that Russian is enough.
Yeah, it's also like this person, this politician Medvedchuk here. This guy built entire career on being like a KGB attorney, basically, and then like a political shield for Moscow and some stuff. And yeah, he fled his house. He ran from a house arrest just before the war started, and yeah, people shot a video of. Maybe let me just Google it real quick. Yeah, so this person lived in Ukraine. As far as I know, he lived most of his life in Ukraine. But then this person doesn't understand Ukraine at all. I think, yeah, like he's so much in his bubble, so much. Let me just scroll real quick to find something relevant, because I think yeah, this one.
While you're looking for it, I also want to add that Viktor Medvedchuk owned his own train that looked like Tsar's, maybe Nicholas II's train, because Nicholas was also big in trains. So it's like aesthetics were also very Russian in how he lived, and probably, yeah, he had his own bubble in which he did not even had the contact with Ukrainian culture.
Yeah, he like, yeah, maybe I should show it later someday. So this picture on screen is irrelevant, but we'll get to it. So it's entirely possible, if you only use Russian, to live in Ukraine and completely, like, for your entire life, you don't get it. You don't get a single aspect of it. You are so much in your Russian speaking bubble that so reality is bent for you. You only see like drug addicts on the street, failed economy. You see, and you only talk to people who are like that. So in your bubble, everyone invites Russia. Everyone wants a restoration of Soviet Union because you are in that bubble. So I think if this person Medvedchuk was the only trusted contact of Putin in Ukraine, that's where Putin might get his idea that everyone here welcomes Ukraine. Because here is this person, he lives in Ukraine, he talks to a lot of Ukrainian locals, and they all report the same thing. Soviet Union is welcome here. But no, it's not. It's really a minority of people. And back to you on that point that like a lot of Western people see this as an exotic thing. Yeah, like learning Russian and you can travel 1/6 of the world and stuff. You can, like for a person who already lives in the Western world, already knows something like English, maybe like as a primary language or like a second language, which he speaks often. Like a trip to Russia might be something like, yeah, like an exotic place to visit, really. And if you see all these old planes, all Soviet stuff, all of that like romanticized in Western media to a great extent. If you watched Stranger Things, you know there's this like trope of bad Russian bad Soviets, and they exploited it to death. So really visiting the place is like maybe an exotic thing, but what a Western person needs to understand about this part of Earth is that this exact place that is exotic for you and you can choose to live anytime you want is actually a jail. And it's not only like it's not like maybe Soviet Union was a literal jail because you were not allowed to leave. But nowadays, only knowing Russian is a factor in your inability to leave. Like you only know Russian, and you live in some Ust somewhere, Nizhny something, as you said, and you basically can't live anywhere else. If you can't receive like classes, if you can't attend classes to learn English, or you don't want to because you think Russian is great, then you end up like a lot of Russians in Germany who still don't know German. A lot of Russians in Estonia who know nothing of local culture, or something like Medvedchuk in Ukraine, who lived most of his life here. He appeared to not know shit about Ukraine.
I want to jump in here. That's a really good segue to what I wanted to say about the Baltic countries and how they responded to colonization by Russians, because it was not super long. It was only like 50, 60 years, depending on how you see it. And in the Baltic countries, they say it was double occupation, first by the Nazis and then by the Soviets. When I grew up, when I was like 10, I watched Russian news, and I remember these reports as Estonian fascists, topple our government. They want to get rid of the traces of Soviet legacy. They dismantled the monument to the unknown soldiers and so forth. I see that this narrative reappears in academic books. And I acquired a really interesting book published at the MIT Press in 2019. It's Dmitri Kachenov, Citizenship. It's a political science book.
Should I show it to screen?
Yes. So it's Dmitri Kachenov, Citizenship. Kachenov.
Oh, here it is. Citizenship.
Citizenship, yes.
Oh yeah, he has an entire website.
Yeah. So you may think that this guy represents a democratic point of view, but there are two things about this book. First, it doesn't mention Ukrainians at all. Like only one time he mentions Ukraine, it's in a colonial perspective as a colonized state. But he mentions a lot of Soviet history and Russia. But also, he really makes Latvians look like villains because they introduced the category of non-citizen.
Is this a guy?
Yes.
So this guy will tell me that a bunch of other guys, like a nation, a country, requiring you to learn their native language is villainous.
Exactly. He says it directly. He gives a quotation in Estonian and says, as you don't understand this, as you don't understand this, Estonians also did not understand this speech by politicians because only 4% of the people in Estonia speak Estonian, which is already a manipulation.
Yeah, this already looks exactly like this modern claims that Ukrainians themselves don't speak Ukrainian. This is exactly the same claim.
Yeah, so it's a pattern. That's how they describe it. Yeah. But also, he makes, as I said, Latvians to look villains because they have the people who do not have voting rights. because they're Russian speakers and they didn't learn anything about their country in which they were settled by the Soviet government. And he describes it as the violation of human rights and so forth. And this is how you sell a Russian imperialistic idea by a book written for the MIT press, blatantly in your face. If you want to know how Russian academics build the narrative on, minorities inside their imperialistic culture, read this book.
Yeah. We recommend it. I recommend it on this guy's face alone. He looks like a Russian. what do you know? He looks like.
He also thinks like a Russian. So maybe he's not Dmitri, but just Dmitri.
Yeah, imagine you sit in a bar somewhere, and this guy comes up and he tells you I can't vote in this country because I don't know its language and I don't know its history.
And also my history.
I mean, I now reside in Lviv, and I am not registered in Lviv, so I don't have legal residency in Lviv. So I can't vote for Lviv's mayor. I can't vote on local elections for Lviv because I am not from Lviv. I have not invested properly in Lviv. If I buy a house here or an apartment, it is considered an investment in this region, and then I can get the legal residency in here, and I am granted the right to vote on the local elections. So my vote matters. So you come in Estonia or Latvia?
Latvia, yeah.
So you come to Latvia. Maybe you lived here your entire life, and now you don't invest in this. Your skin is not in the game, basically. Here is this group of people trying to advance something, to advance their country, and you are considered by your actions and attitude as a person not being on the same page, basically.
Absolutely. So this is the response to somebody saying that the category of non-citizenship is humiliating and violating European ideas of rights. No, it's not, because if there is a group of people moved to a territory for colonization, and then historically they continue to live there, they have their children, grandchildren, it doesn't mean that ethnically they should be excluded. They are excluded on the basis of their investment, and this investment is cultural. If they don't want to make this investment, it only tells one thing to people who live there for centuries, and that's their nation, that these people still follow the agenda of the imperialism, even if they don't understand this, even if they reproduce it, because they never learned anything else. And they never learned anything else because they never stepped out of the bubble in which they lived. Exactly as Viktor Medvedchuk in Ukraine. He doesn't want to see anything but the Soviet Union. And as many people now in Russia, they couldn't invent a liberal democracy, although they tried, but they failed. And so they're just returning to their old technologies and their old truths because they have nothing else. They are in their bubble.
Yeah. So I think we spoke enough of this colonialism thing, and I think we also will elaborate on it even more in future podcasts. I wanted to end this on a funny note with Patrushev, who is chief of Security Council in Russia, claiming that Poland is now transitioning to seize territories of Western Ukraine. Some Russian announces that another country is now moving to occupy Ukrainian territories. This I don't know how to describe it. Like, are they that schizophrenic or what? Like, maybe you can answer this because I don't know how to approach it.
I heard it from the very beginning of the war, and this is how some propagandists showed Ukraine, you know, like split by Hungary, Poland, and the other neighbors. This is, they're looking just for the pretext for Molotov, Ribbentrop Pact, but with other cultures, because they know that, you know, if you can sell fascism to other cultures, then it's gonna spread. But there's nothing to comment on here. It's just bullshit for the Russian audience. And I think that, you know, they're transmitting this message to everybody in the world, but we just need to stop caring about it because it's bullshit. But one funny thing about this news is that, look, even the photographer is Lvov. So, you know, I don't know, maybe this guy exists, maybe not, but most likely, he needed to be invented to, like, you know, Lvov, right? It's a Russian name for Lviv. It's a Western territory. Look, it all makes sense, you know, it all makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like how Lviv community reacted to all of this. It's, yeah, so let me show another window. Yeah, do you see it? This one here. Okay, so this is a screenshot, like RIA Novosti again. Patrushev claimed that Poland is capturing Ukrainian territories by this point. And it's immediately like jokes about beavers and like Polish and beavers. Colony #1 for beavers. Biberka, like the beaver, wants to be renamed. This picture that claims that traitors already started renaming things. This is like Galицkaya Kasa Osiedlosti. This is like a Polish bank, like historical building, was under Poland. Like, here is Mayor Lviv shaking hands with some Polish official, I think a Polish military official. Yeah, like we are in on this joke.
I think that was the prime minister. That was the prime minister.
This is the prime minister,
Morawiecki.
Right?
Yeah,
Morawiecki, right? Because yeah, so the text here claims that Mayor Lviv just surrendered the city to Poland.
To Polish general, to a
Polish general.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, yeah. So yeah, I think like post-Soviet countries can consume Russian media once in a while, just to laugh a bit, because they are like, at this point they are hilarious. They're just hilarious. Like more Western people, like Americans, I don't think it's that funny to them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The thing is, we are hysterical about these claims because we understand, we are in the context, and we understand that, like, Poles do not think imperialistically anymore because we encountered a lot of them, and we live in the territory. Like, you know, there is a lot of movement between two countries, so we laugh at it. But somebody who reads this at face value, and there are lots of people like this, they will just probably be confused and maybe even buy into this.
Yes, I think some U.S. tank is already claiming that Lviv is now Polish for some reason. So yeah, so I think we are witnessing the construction of the whole alternative reality, and yeah, we were somehow somewhat close to complete alternative reality when USSR was a thing. Close, but not this close. Like, where you can construct like entire real-time social media experiences specifically for Russians, that they stay in the bubble and they think everyone else is in the same bubble. So this is manufacturing content on steroids, basically. Where you're not producing like newspapers or traditional media anymore, but yeah, you still do, but it's not the main focus. It's like a legacy thing for older people, but you are curating an experience for younger people also. Like, like why it is so important to like first week of war, ban Facebook, ban Instagram, ban Twitter. Like Russians still on Twitter, still on Instagram. They post stories, they tweet, they do all sorts of things. But this was important. So even those who still use those social media banned, as far as I know, they don't enforce the ban. They just like you can circumvent with VPN or something. But you are still nudged to that bubble. Yeah, so your main one, your main social media will remain this bubble of yours, and everything else will be like an outlet. I think they don't enforce the ban just so the anger can come out. Like like a lot of like anti-war Russians on Twitter are ranging from hilarious to like as hateful as a person can be. Yeah, so this is like they and these are not bots. They are just in a bubble. They are just in a bubble. And this thing with Poland, this claim, I think they start isolating even further. I think they are trying to construct the reality where Ukraine is no more. I think they are preparing for a scenario where they lose, but they want to show something as a victory. So even if they lose Donbass, even if they lose like Donetsk, Lugansk, even if they lose Crimea, they can still broadcast in their bubble that there are no such thing as Ukraine anymore. It's only Poland. It's only Poland now. Yeah, so like NATO has successfully captured Ukraine, as we told you, and they can. Yeah, so I think this is a preparation for that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that this is where our reality ends, and their meanings start. You know, they just speak about something we don't see because we're not in that bubble.
Yeah, and also it can be a pretext for Belarus entering the war, like invading in Volyn because it's really close to Poland, claiming they are saving Ukrainians from evil Poland trying to capture them. So it's like double-sided thing. It's like it's really like yeah. So this like Soviet style people, I think they really like to think in chess terms that your move must do two things at once, or something. Always. And so yeah, if they are lucky, Lukashenko attacks. If they are not lucky, here is the thing, and we can build upon this thing. We can like produce an entire reality show, like like the entire Truman Show for the population of our country.
There's one book that I really want to recommend to everybody who still discovers Russian culture. It's Aksionov, Ostrov Krym, the island Crimea. I found it in Vladivostok, actually, and I read it before. But the thing is, it's exactly about annexation of Crimea by some new force. And the whole thing is that the narrator and the protagonist cannot really see what's happening because of the crowd around this annexation. what's happening. But he watches TV, and that's how he learns that Crimea suddenly became like controlled by a different state. And this is like a template of any Soviet occupation, although Crimea was Soviet at that time in 1979. But it's a joke that turned out to be very, very real. So I recommend this book.
Yeah, cool. Oh, at this point, we will be wrapping up. So what I want to say also is like a usual housekeeping things. So consider liking this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe. Yeah, I hope that we getting you closer to understanding what's happening here and our perspective. I hope this video was very useful to you. So maybe consider subscribing so you won't miss our regular podcast.
And also please make healthy cultural choices so Yura can get out of the bathroom during the air raids, not being afraid for his life just for being Ukrainian.
Yeah, so I think they constantly throw Pushkin at me.
Yeah. Well, if it's a monument, then it's also like a missile, like they can bomb Ukraine with monuments to Pushkin because they have so many.
Yeah. Yeah. The very, 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 very last thing. Here, there is a meme. Like we have this Ukrainian podcast about daily ongoing stuff on the battlefield called Flava. And one of the very frequent questions that were asked and then became a meme: can we fire on Kerch Bridge from our missile systems? Maybe like can we do it theoretically? This was asked so many times that it became a meme. So we asked, like, we see like some novel things, anything that comes like. The most obvious thing, anything from our Western partners that comes for us as a weapon. Immediately, the question arises: can we destroy Crimean Bridge with it? No. It's bad. We really need something to destroy the Crimean Bridge.
Yeah, because
so we like in a meme fashion, we even considered throwing all of these Pushkin statues at Crimean Bridge to destroy it. So they became useful.
The Crimean Bridge is like the Berlin Wall. It's like an accomplishment of Soviet engineering, but if you think about it, it's a colonial tool. So.
I think it will fall on its own.
Yeah, it's terrible. Yeah,
like it usually happens in Russia. It will fall just on its own, or some guard will really ignore safety precautions and it will blow up for some reason. I think it will happen like that.
I think that we need to go on with the plan to bomb it with Pushkin's monuments. It's much better. Symbolic.
Yeah. On that note, bye everyone.
Bye.
I hope this was useful.
Okay.